Dear participants and colleagues, I will now present for a 6-minute talk on coconut palms of tall types, dwarf types, compact dwarfs, and other intermediate varieties and forms.
I will first talk about dwarf type and tall type coconut palms, and how to identify them. Then I will introduce the compact dwarf types, which are of great importance for the Pacific region, and some intermediate forms. Finally, I will show how the environment influences the characteristics of some of these varieties.
Coconut varieties are now classified in 4 main types. But the 2 most abundant categories are tall types and dwarf types. Tall types represent 90 to 95% of all existing coconut palms. They are often called simply talls. They generally form quite heterogeneous cross-pollinating populations. Talls can grow at a rate of more than 50 centimeters annually when young and flower at 6 to 10 years with an economic lifespan of 60 to 70 years. The largest stems we saw were located in the gardens of a resort in Rarotonga, Cook Islands. The dwarf types are less common and always associated with man and woman habitat. They are often considered as the most advanced stage of domestication of the coconut palm. They are often called dwarfs, thin-trunk dwarfs, fragile dwarfs, or Malayan-type dwarfs. Indeed, the most widely known cultivars of this group are the Malayan red and yellow dwarfs, although they probably originates from Indonesia. They grow at a rate of 15 to 30 centimeters annually, have a productive lifespan of 30 to 40 years and usually start flowering 12 to 30 months after field planting. Apart from their usually short height, these varieties show a combination of common characteristics: orthogamic preference, small size of organs, precocity, and rapid emission of inflorescences. Orthogamy means that the dwarfs generally self-pollinates, the same palm being male and female. Here is a Pemba red dwarf from Tanzania. Then, how to recognize them? Just have a look at the stem and at the bases of the leaves. Of relatively smooth aspect and clear color, the stem carries regular marks. Each leaf produced by the palm creates, on the stem, a leaf scar in the shape of a crescent. The gap between 2 leaf scars makes it possible to distinguish the 2 types of coconut palm, tall types, and dwarf types. For the tall type, the distance between 2 leaf scars is generally higher than 5 centimeters. For the dwarf types, it does not exceed 2.5 centimeters.
Compact dwarfs varieties, called as New Laker or New Lea, were already known in the 1850s, at least in Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa. In Fiji, the first mention of the New Laker coconut variety was found in a dictionary dated 1850. Harries, in 1978, has described the New Laker as follows: except for the very short internodes, which reduce trunk height and produce a dense leaf canopy, all other characteristics resemble those of tall varieties. The well-developed bole, the trunk girth, the predominantly cross-pollinating flowering pattern, the lack of bright red or yellow fruit colors, the large fruit size and an exclusive distribution, until very recently, within certain Pacific islands, all point to a completely distinct selection process. Note that nowadays, many forms of red and yellow compact dwarfs can be found in Pacific gardens, even if they remain quite rare. Compact dwarfs and their hybrids are probably one of the best possible future for coconut agriculture. Replanting these types could be very useful for mitigating the damages caused by Oryctes beetles. Harvest is also less costly. Palms are smaller, less sensitive to cyclones and safer. I recently proposed a modification of the international nomenclature to designate the varieties of coconut palms. This modification consists in defining a particular coding for the international names and abbreviation for dwarf compact types. Scientists have classified coconut palms into 2 main groups, dwarf and tall. In fact, in plantations and villages, there are many intermediate forms. But since the scientists had fixed their classification, they subsequently essentially collected tall or dwarf type, often leaving out the intermediate forms. It is true that the situation has been complicated by the recent spread of dwarf x tall hybrids, which often show intermediate growth. Farmers often take seed nuts from these hybrids to replant. They then get a mixture of tall, dwarf and intermediate forms. Some farmers, particularly in India, but perhaps also in the Pacific, have succeeded in selecting and fixing new varieties from this mixture. Finally, the environment also plays a major role in growth. Here is the case of a variety from the island of Wallis, classified as intermediate. This strain looks like a dwarf compact but is absolutely huge. She seems far too bulky to be classified as a dwarf, but her height growth is too low for a tall guy. Some Wallisians have the custom of replanting a seed of the same variety at the foot of a coconut tree. They plant the son under the mother. It can therefore be assumed that these two coconut palms are genetically identical. However, the son, which grew in the shade of its mother, in a situation of root competition, has a thinner stipe and faster vertical growth. This is very probably caused solely by micro-variations in the environment.
Dear participants and colleagues, thank you for listening.